On a frigid, overcast morning in January 1945, deep in the Ardennes forest near Bastogne, Sergeant Richard Skip Muck crouched in a half-frozen foxhole, scanning the horizon for any sign of German movement. The siege had dragged on for days, shells falling unpredictably, every breath thick with the tension of men unsure if they'd survive another hour. Eyewitnesses remember Muck pausing to pass a meager chocolate ration to a shivering comrade, softly joking that they'd taste something better once they were out of this freezing trap. Moments later, an artillery shell exploded nearby, killing Muck instantly. That fleeting kindness, handing over one of the few comforts he had left, sums up the steady grace he'd shown throughout his military career in easy company. Though overshadowed by the fog of war, Muck's story reveals how a quiet, earnest soldier from a small town took on some of World War II's fiercest challenges, and how, in the end, he gave everything he had. Born on August 18, 1922, in Tonawanda, New York, Richard Eugene Skip Muck grew up in a working-class neighborhood during the latter part of the Roaring Twenties. While some parts of the country flashed with jazz clubs and glitz, Tonawanda led a more modest life. His father, Eugene, worked in a local factory, while his mother, Mildred, watched over him and his siblings at home. Even though life was not lavish, Skip remembered a childhood filled with neighborhood games, chores that built character, and the comforting closeness of family. By his teens, Tonawanda, like most of the nation, felt the harsh grip of the Great Depression. Skip contributed by running small errands, delivering newspapers, or lending a hand at the local diner. This communal ethos of shared effort and neighborly goodwill made a lasting impression on him. In high school, friends recall that Skip had a quiet sense of humor and a reliable presence. He wasn't the loudest or the star athlete, but if there was a team in need of an extra player or a friend needing encouragement, he was the first to step forward. Teachers noted his kindness, whether tutoring a struggling classmate or staying behind to reorganize desks after a school function. Yet he also showed a spark of ambition. While many around him might have been content working in local factories or shops, Skip felt drawn to bigger horizons, particularly as ominous reports of war in Europe spread across newsreels. He graduated in 1940, the same year that the global storm clouds began to intensify. Nazi Germany had already invaded Poland, and Britain stood alone under relentless air raids. The United States remained neutral, but the tide of international conflict grew harder to ignore. After the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, there was no longer any doubt. America was in the fight. Recruitment offices popped up nationwide, and patriotic fervor swept through small towns like Tonawanda. The immediate sense of duty struck Skip. He saw posters proclaiming the airborne as the Army's elite. The notion of paratroopers, soldiers who would leap into the most hazardous zones, captured his imagination. At 19, Skip decided if he was going to serve, he would do so with the best. Encouraged by a friend, he enlisted for the paratrooper training, leaving behind the everyday rhythms of his hometown for the rigors of the United States Army. In early 1942, he arrived at Camp Toccoa in Georgia, where the newly formed 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment ran a punishing schedule designed to weed out the faint-hearted. Recruits sprinted up Currahee Mountain countless times, scrambled through obstacle courses at dawn, and endured instructors who pushed them to their psychological limits. Skip's gentle temperament stood out among rougher personalities, but his quiet resilience surprised many. Letters home mentioned how Toccoa's demands wore him down physically, yet there was a camaraderie that buoyed him. He wrote to his mother, "These fellas, they're like brothers. We share everything, cigarettes, jokes, our last bit of soap. It almost makes the pain worth it. By the time he completed his jumps to earn the cherished wings, he was assigned to the 2nd Battalion of the 506th, popularly known as Easy Company. Preparing for combat was an ongoing process. From Tocoa, the regiment moved to Fort Benning, then to advanced training areas, and finally shipped out to England to join the 101st Airborne Division in the final ramp-up for Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of Normandy. In the English countryside, daily drills and night jumps honed their skills. Troopers practiced stealth landings, patrolling, and quick regrouping under simulated chaos. The notion of leaping out of a plane in pitch-black skies was daunting, but Skip overcame fear by focusing on the tight-knit fellowship among Easy Company. That bond, he realized, was the real advantage. Men willing to risk their lives for each other would be unstoppable against any enemy. He wrote to a friend back home that he felt a strange thrill at the prospect of doing something that matters so much, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared. On June 5, 1944, as part of the wave set to jump into Normandy the night before D-Day, Skip boarded a C-47 loaded with gear. The plane's engine roar muffled the nervous chatter. Weighted by parachutes and weaponry, the men could barely move. When the green light finally flicked on, Skip and the others stepped out into a swirl of darkness, tracer fire, and anti-aircraft bursts. Many paratroopers, Skip included, missed their intended drop zones. He landed amid hedgerows with a few scattered troopers from various units, uncertain who was friend or foe in the dark. Yet by dawn, pockets of airborne soldiers had improvised squads, seizing key roads and small villages. For Skip, this marked the beginning of real combat. Close-quarters firefights, hidden snipers, frantic attempts to hold newly captured positions. He distinguished himself as calm and deliberate under pressure, whether manning a machine gun or helping coordinate a flanking maneuver. Easy Company soon solidified itself as a force to be reckoned with, pushing through Carentan to link the American beachheads. Those who survived described the intensity of each day. Hedgerow skirmishes, artillery thundering overhead, the terror of ambush. Skip's letters from this period were short, but heartfelt. To a cousin, he wrote that the farmland reminded him of fields near Tonawanda, except the risk of stumbling onto a mortar or a hidden MG-42 overshadowed any sense of normalcy. Despite the fear, he believed they were freeing the French from tyranny, an ideal that helped him cope with the daily sight of casualties. Following the success in Normandy, Skip and the rest of the 101st returned to England to regroup. The hours turned into days of rest, medical checks, and replacements filling the ranks. Soon, talk of another airborne mission reached them, Operation Market Garden in September 1944. This bold plan aimed for paratroopers and armor to seize river bridges in the Netherlands, creating a corridor straight into Germany. Having survived Normandy, Skip understood all too well that each jump could be his last. But if the plan worked, it might end the war by Christmas. With that hope in mind, he boarded yet another plane and dropped in broad daylight amidst cheering Dutch civilians. At first, the operation went well, towns were liberated, and the men of Easy Company marched through excited crowds. However, the deeper they pushed, the fiercer German resistance became. The attempt to secure the final bridge at Arnhem faltered, leaving many British paratroopers encircled. The Allies ultimately fell short of the grand objective, but Easy Company prevented a total collapse on the corridor's flanks. During these actions, Skip showed the same quiet dependability. Whether lugging extra ammo across a canal or helping a wounded trooper to safety, he never boasted of heroics, simply did what needed doing. During Market Garden, Muck again showed remarkable generosity by helping local civilians despite limited resources. This small act reflected the kind-heartedness that had stayed with him since Tonawanda. Although Market Garden ended in disappointment, the Allies retained momentum. By late 1944, it seemed a matter of time before Nazi Germany collapsed. Unknown to them, Hitler launched a massive offensive in the dense Ardennes region. The resulting Battle of the Bulge caught the Allies off guard, forcing them to scramble for defensive lines. The 101st Airborne, including Easy Company, rushed into Bastogne, a crucial crossroads for German advances. The harsh winter, said to be one of the coldest in decades, greeted them with inadequate winter gear, dwindling ammunition, and minimal medical supplies. The men dug into shallow defensive positions around the town, bombarded nightly by German artillery. Food was scarce. Many survived on meager scraps or coffee if they were lucky. Frostbite threatened as severely as enemy bullets. Throughout that bleak siege, Sergeant Muck rose to the moment. Having been promoted for his steady leadership, he now found himself trying to keep morale alive among replacements who'd barely had time to learn the ropes. He checked on each foxhole, offering a reassuring word or sharing a contraband chocolate bar. Some recall him making gallows humor about how the Ardennes reminded him of upstate New York in winter, except for the shells, of course. It wasn't that he shrugged off danger. He simply recognized how critical morale was to survival. If the men believed they could outlast the siege, that belief might translate into the gritty determination required. Nevertheless, the reality was brutal. Soldiers recounted hearing the moans of wounded comrades echo through the pines, the stark whistles of mortar rounds, and the hollow hunger that gnawed at them. Muck's diaries or letters from this period no longer survive in detail, but those who were close to him later recalled how he wrestled with thoughts of home. He worried about his mother receiving official bad news, about never seeing the Niagara River again. Yet he kept going, day after day, encouraging those around him that help would eventually arrive. In truth, even he didn't know when or if relief might come. On January 10, 1945, Bastogne endured another hellish barrage. The artillery had paused briefly earlier that morning, letting some troopers check on wounded or catch a breath. During a brief lull, Muck quietly checked on the condition of his men. Then the shells started again, one landing devastatingly close to the foxhole shared by Muck and Private Alex Pincala. The impact was fatal and instantaneous for both. As soon as men realized who'd been hit, a wave of devastation spread. The soldier, who had consoled so many, who'd offered the last bits of comfort he had, was gone. The survivors recalled the heartbreak of retrieving what remained, faced with the cold fact that even the bravest or kindest among them was not protected from random tragedy. News of his death circulated among Easy Company. Some men tried to stifle tears, others wept openly. The war demanded immediate focus, no time for extended mourning. Yet in letters home, they mentioned the shock of losing Muck. He'd had a gift for making the unendurable slightly less grim, whether by a well-placed joke or an unwavering expression of empathy. The men often said they'd avenge their lost friends by doing their jobs even better, forging on through the last months of war. That sense of dedicated vengeance and respect propelled them forward. Eventually, Bastogne was relieved by elements of General Patton's Third Army, and the Allies continued their march into Germany. But for those who knew Skip, Bastogne remained the place where his warm presence was violently taken. In the broader context of the 101st Airborne's achievements, Muck's story underscores the essential contributions of every enlisted man, not just the high-profile officers. Controversies about the use of paratroopers in such a desperate winter siege do exist. Some historians question the wisdom of placing lightly equipped airborne units in Bastogne without adequate supplies, pointing out that men like Muck were forced to endure extreme conditions. Supporters argue that the 101st Fierce Stand stalled a major German push, potentially saving many more Allied lives. In the end, the siege of Bastogne became a symbol of U.S. determination, and Muck's death there exemplified both the cost and the heroism of holding that line. Today, many are introduced to Sergeant Muck through the Band of Brothers account, as portrayed in interviews, documentaries, or dramatized episodes focusing on Easy Company. The series captures glimpses of Muck's quiet reliability, though it cannot fully convey the real grit of day-to-day survival. For those who delve into his story more deeply, the awareness that he was just one among countless paratroopers who gave their all highlights the war's personal dimension. He wasn't a strategic mastermind or famed commander, just a man who found himself called to extraordinary feats, stepping up to responsibilities beyond anything he could have imagined in Tonawanda. In terms of direct historical impact, Muck's significance aligns with that of many foot soldiers in the war. Without him and men like him, the grand strategies of generals would have meant little. Their stamina, unity, and willingness to go on the offensive, despite fear, cold, and the knowledge that any shell could be their last, helped tip the balance in Europe. More specifically, he contributed to the success of Easy Company's various missions, from the vital link-up in Normandy to the defensive stand in Bastogne. In a war that pivoted on the sum of countless individual actions, even the seemingly modest efforts of a single sergeant could tilt local battles, and thus the overall tide, further toward victory. Modern audiences reflect on Muck's experiences for an emotional connection that transcends dates and battle maps. His presence reminds us of everyday kindness, like sharing your last ration. That detail resonates. It shows that in the savage environment of war, some souls maintain an unwavering humanity. The letters and testimonies about Muck seldom mention grand heroics. Instead, they describe day-to-day concern for his fellow troopers, determination to accomplish each mission, and a stoic acceptance of war's harsh unpredictability. This modest brand of heroism often resonates more profoundly than the bravado sometimes celebrated in war films. As we look back on his service, we might also wonder how he personally coped with the moral tension of taking part in lethal combat. While the record is scant on explicit statements, one can glean from his actions that he reconciled his gentle nature with war's brutality by focusing on protecting the men around him and liberating civilians under Nazi oppression. The anguish in some of his letters, tearful mentions of men he barely knew, hints at how deeply he felt each loss. Nonetheless, he kept soldiering on. That willingness to bear emotional weight for the sake of an overarching cause is something that resonates with the complexities many veterans still face, though controversies do arise when discussing whether the paratroopers were always deployed effectively or if the high casualties they incurred were justified. Muck's personal path is less about second-guessing orders and more about how individuals persevere under them. Historians debate the absolute necessity of certain drops or siege positions, but from the vantage of a single soldier on the ground, the question isn't about overarching strategy. It's about survival, about the next dawn, and about loyalty to the fellow troopers who share your foxhole. That intimate bond, often overshadowed by big-picture strategizing, lies at the heart of Muck's story. For those learning about him today, the significance lies partly in the humility of his service. He wasn't a figure destined for historical headlines, yet in giving everything, he immortalized a truth about war that victory hinges on ordinary people stepping up in extraordinary ways. That brand of understated heroism resonates across generations, reminding us that even if we're not called to a battlefield, the same virtues of empathy, perseverance, and devotion to community can guide us through hardship. We are left with an image of a quiet, resolute figure bracing against the cold in Bastogne, refusing to give in to despair, extending what little he had, food, empathy, or hope, to others. That image is a powerful reminder that behind historical turning points are countless individual hearts, each beating with fear, love, and a commitment to stand by their comrades. Sergeant Richard "Skip" Muck may not have lived to see victory in Europe, but his role in forging that victory is undeniable. His memory, preserved through testimonies, diaries, and heartfelt tributes from fellow soldiers, continues to speak to us about loyalty, sacrifice, and the enduring human cost of war. And that's all for today's video. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up, let us know your thoughts in the comments section, and subscribe so you won't miss out on future uploads. See you next time.